President Trump said the United States is, quote, locked and loaded and prepared to respond. But I don't think he wants to go to war. This president is not looking to go to war. The Iranians know this. The press knows this, but they're not saying that. Iran first attacked our oil tankers, then shot down one of our drones. Now they've attacked Saudi Arabia, shutting off 5% of the global oil supply. Things are going to get worse. Now, here's why. Iran wants sanctions relief. That's not a secret. We are crippling them economically because they are going for nuclear weapons. The minute they get nuclear weapons, we have to deal with these crazy people like we deal with Kim Jong-un. There are no good options. So the president is using every bit of our power that we have to cripple them and hopefully get them to fall into line, or some sort of a regime change that does not come from us, but comes from the people. The people like the West. This is a different place in the Middle East. Now, my advice to the president would be this. Just keep your cool and weather the storm. Let the Saudis respond militarily to the militia that, attacked the Saudi oil refinery. Do what Israel has been doing for decades. Have the Saudis target the militias, destroy the high-tech weaponry they have. Meanwhile, have the Treasury Department to continue to hit the Iranian regime where it hurts the most in their wallets. Continue maximum pressure because it is working. Iran is doing what terrorists do. They are trying to terrorize the world and scare us. They are trying to terrorize us and terrorize the world into getting their way. This attack will not be our last. But we cannot continue the business of responding with our military every time someone else should be taking care of it themselves. The Saudis have bought a lot of weapons from us. Maybe they should start using them themselves. We should not go to war. But I want you to understand fully how much the world is changing. And I hate to... Well, no, I don't. I want to give you the history of this social revolution, Saudi economics, the politics, and how we're even in bed with them in the first place. Because Saudi Arabia has played a very key role in keeping our dollar stable. And I don't know if that's going to last much longer because the world is changing. So let me give you a bit of history. At the end of World War II, Europe and Asia, everybody was in shambles except the United States. The USSR was pressing its military might all across Eastern Europe, and we needed financial stability. All of the Western allies tied their currency to the U.S. dollar, which at the time was backed in gold. Then the United States and the rest of the West got greedy, and they said there's not enough gold to do all the things we want to do. And so in 1971, Nixon closed what's called the gold window at the Treasury, which meant if you had $1, you could go in and get $1's worth of gold. We were off the gold standard. But what people didn't know at the time, or most, is that Nixon had a deal with the Saudi royal family. Our money had to be backed by something. Otherwise, people, what good would it be? Why would you need the U.S. dollar anymore? In exchange, Saudi Arabia agreed that that they would only accept U.S. dollars for the purchase of its oil if the United States would provide ongoing military support for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So we would protect them. And they would make sure that everyone who said, hey, yeah, I'd like to buy a barrel of oil from you, had to do it in U.S. dollars. So that is why the U.S. has the, reserve currency around the rest of the world. But that is beginning to change. However, to this day, 99% of international bank transfers close in U.S. dollars, and over 92% of all oil purchases occur in U.S. dollars. And it's been going this way for 50 years. We've had an alliance with Saudi Arabia. We ensure that their borders are safe. They ensure that the U.S. dollar is the primary currency used for financial transactions worldwide. But something happened here in America. Something big happened. About 15 years ago, the Roughnecks here in Texas, in Colorado, and Utah, North Dakota, Kansas, they figured out a new way, a new technique of changing the shale stone that we have into oil. Now, shale is oil that long ago dried into rock. How do you take that rock and turn it back into oil? Well, the process is called fracking. Fracking took hundreds of millions of cubic yards of earth and transformed it into energy. We now have 1.8 trillion barrels of oil here in the United States. That's enough energy production for more than 1,000 years of U.S. energy production, including any population growth. For 1,000 years, we can be energy independent. So what does that mean? Well, now that we have the largest oil reserves, oil production from the U.S. has put a permanent cap on global oil prices unless there's a significant disruption in global oil supplies. Prices, they say, now will have a hard time getting over $70 a barrel. If this would have happened in 2008, the price of oil could have gone up to $200 a barrel. What are we looking at? $65 a barrel? It's up 20%. Now, this is really significant for Saudi Arabia. I want you to consider the following. Because we have the capability, the U.S. is keeping oil prices suppressed into the $55, $60 barrel range, okay? Saudi Arabia is only profitable producing oil at about $80 a barrel. So what does that mean? More than 80% of Saudi Arabia's GDP is based in oil and energy production. For comparison, in the U.S., less than 8% of our GDP relies on energy production. They're 80. So a few years ago, Saudi Arabia operated its first budget deficit since the 1950s. They've been swimming in cash. It's the only thing that has held that country together because everybody is rich. But now they can't afford those things. In 2016, they issued government bonds. That means they took on government debt for the first time since the 50s to cover the budget shortfalls. The government is now losing about $12 billion a year and is, has to raise their debt ceiling to cover those deficits. In 2017, Saudi Arabia announced new plans under the Crown Prince, you remember him, Mohammed bin Salman, to take the Saudi Arabian oil industry, Aramco, and take it to an IPO. They were going to modernize everything, and they were going to let everybody invest. But by 2018, that IPO was falling apart. Oil prices had fallen below $50 a barrel, and the IPO, which they expected to raise nearly $2 trillion, was failing to receive any bids to raise even $50 billion. There was one journalist who was out there saying, this is crazy. His plan, the plan that the Crown Prince was pushing was Vision 2030 for Saudi Arabia. The guy who was the most outspoken about what he was doing with this IPO and Aramco was Jamal Khashoggi, the guy who was murdered in Turkey. As soon as he was murdered, the IPO was shelved because now nobody wanted to buy anything from Aramco. So fast forward earlier to this year. Saudi Arabia and other OPEC nations announced to cut back oil production as a means to raise global prices. And by summer, they had succeeded in getting oil prices up to around $65 a barrel. But we came in and quickly came online and increased global supply to make up for the reduced OPEC production. We couldn't do that before. And by August, oil prices were back to $55 to $58 a barrel. Remember, Saudi oil has got to be about $80 a barrel, or they can't afford it. So what happened 3 weeks ago? And then what happened over the weekend? And what does all of this mean for us in the United States in the future? So Saudi Arabia needed this IPO. They needed foreign investment. So 3 weeks ago, they go back to the drawing board. They go to J.P. Morgan. That was the U.S. bank that was leading. Barclays, Bank of Japan. All of these banks had gotten together and said, okay, we'll put together this IPO. Well, now 50% of oil production goes offline at an Aramco oil refinery. It is a massive blow to Saudi Arabia and may completely derail the IPO. That will have a devastating effect, driving oil prices up, at least in the short term. But remember, we can now come online with new production and make up for any shortfalls. Now, the fact that this is at least reportedly by Yemeni militia who are backed by Iran, means that there is a proxy war that's going on with Iran and Saudi Arabia. They've been fighting it for the last few years. And this has weakened one of America's most consistent and reliable parties in keeping the U.S. dollar as our reserve currency. So what do? Because we can just unplug from Saudi Arabia. But if we unplug from Saudi Arabia, the world may unplug from our dollar. It also shows us how desperate Iran is. It's Japan, 1940. You know, most people don't understand that Japan was responding to us. We sanctioned and isolated Iran. We insulted, Japan. Now we've done the same thing to Iran, and their economy is crumbling. We have stopped them from selling their oil in the open market, which is something I believe we must do. But all of this bears watching. This may become the story of the last half of this year and might end up dominating global politics through 2020. 99% chance none of the Democratic candidates for presidency have any idea about how much history sits between us. How delicate it is between us and Saudi Arabia. Why we just can't pull the plug on Saudi Arabia. Every American should know this because it will affect us. The question is, where are you getting your news? The question is, what are they talking about today? Is anyone giving you a look at the globe? Because the globe is just starting to smoke everywhere.